Welcome back to the third day of math. We are still looking at decimals. Today we're going to look at how to change a fraction into a decimal. This is the opposite of what we did last class. Last class we took a decimal and we turned it into a fraction. This time we're going from a fraction to a decimal. Let's start off with just our tenths place. So I'm going to use the fraction 3/10. I need to turn this into a decimal, so I need to think, if this is my decimal point, what place value is the tenths? I'm going to switch colors because I don't want this to look like a fraction bar. I'm just going to make a spot for the tenths. That is the tenths place. So I know that my 3 needs to go here in order to say 3/10. Now it says 3/10. If you need to, you can label your place value. That's the tenths. I say this 3/10. Let's try another one. Let's do 7/10. So once again, I'm going to put in my decimal point. If it helps you to draw in your tenths place, you may. If it helps you, you may label it. So now I have 7/10. So all I have to do is put the 7 in the tenths place. Let's look at the hundredths place now. Gotta dry this or the pen won't work. So let's look at the number, or the fraction 9/100ths. If I have 9/100ths, I need to think about how that will look as a decimal. So here's my decimal point, and I know that this is the tenths place, and then next would come the hundredths. So I have 9/100ths. I have to do a little bit more thinking this time than the tenths, because if I put the 9 here, what number will that say? It'll say 9/10. My 9 has to sit in the hundredths place. 9/100ths. But this is not a good looking number because I'm just missing something here. I have a huge blank space. I need to fill it in. Well, let's think about this as money. 9/100ths is the same thing as 9 pennies. If I were to write this as money, I would be writing it, if I wrote it as money, and this is a nice thing to think about when you're dealing with hundredths, is to think about pennies and money. Here's what I would write. I have $0 and I have 9 pennies. That right there says 9 pennies. That is 9/100ths. What did I need to use to fill in that space? I need to put in a 0. So when I have 9/100ths, the 9 is sitting in the hundredths place, I do need a 0 to hold my place because I have no tenths. I have no tenths in that number. Let's try another one. Let's do 4/100ths. This time, I'm going to put in the place value lines, but I'm not going to label them. If you need to label them, you go ahead and do that. You do what works for you. 4/100ths. I know that the 4 is going to need to be in the hundredths place. So this is my hundredths place. The 4 goes here. I cannot leave that tenths place blank because that won't be a good looking number. I need my 0 as my placeholder. That is my 4/100ths. If it helps you to write it as money, you have no dollars. Here's your decimal point. 4/100ths is the same thing as 4 pennies. How do we write 4 pennies? We write it like this, so that this part right here is the same thing that I see right there. Now, let's try a little bit harder. Okay. This time we're going to stick with the hundredths, but I am going to give you 32/100ths. Okay, we have to do a little bit more thinking here. This is the same thing as 32 pennies, because when I see hundredths, I want to think pennies. So if it helps you, you could actually start thinking of it as money. If I think of it as money, I'd have my dollar sign, no dollars, I have no whole numbers, so I have no dollars, my decimal point, and 32 cents. If that helps you, you can write it as money to begin with, and then just know that that is the number we're looking for. But we can also write this just straight as a decimal without using money as a helper. I'm going to put my decimal point. I know that I have to deal with my hundredths space, so there's my tenths. and then here's my hundredths space. I have 32. I have to think about how to get 32 into these spaces. Now, some people might think, well, I have to write it like this, but the 2 is then actually sitting in a different place over here. This is the tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So if I were to read this number, it would say 32 thousandths. So that is not correct. We don't want it sitting over there. An easy hint to help us think about how to write numbers like this is to say the number furthest to the right is going to live in the hundredths place. So that 2 is going to sit here in the hundredths, which means the 3 has to fill in this space. So before, if we had done 2 hundredths, we would have put the 2 here and a 0 here. This time we do have tenths. We have 3 tenths in there. So this now says 32 hundredths. Maybe the writing it as money will help you. That's going to be a choice you're going to have to make which way you want to write it first, or if you even want to mess with money or not. Let's try another one. Let's try 79 hundredths. So again, I'm going to set up my decimal point. I think on this one, especially putting in the place value spots will help you a lot. I have my tenths and my hundredths. Cheating hint here is that you take the number all the way to the right. That is my hundredths. I have to put the 9 in the hundredths place. The 7 fills it in. Now this says 79 hundredths because this is the hundredths. 79 hundredths. 79 hundredths. If you wanted to write it as money, it would be $. Do I have any dollars? No, I do not. I have 79 pennies, 79 pennies, and it should look the same as that one. I'm going to give you one more quick practice on this because I know this is one of the more challenging problems that we do with this. Let's do 15 hundredths. So this is the same thing as 15 pennies, 15 cents. Here is my decimal point, and I have my tenths space and my hundredths space. Going to look for my number furthest to the right. That's the 5. 5 has to go in the hundredths space. 15 hundredths. 15 hundredths. If I wrote it as money, it would be 0 because I have no dollars and 15 cents. So that now this part right here looks the same as this. We have one more. It's kind of the next step up here. Next harder problem. Let's do one more, and this time let's incorporate the ones place. Got to erase all this. Okay, let's look at the ones place. So for my first number, I'm going to have 2 and 3 tenths. Okay, how am I going to write this? Well, I know I'm dealing with tenths. Let's get that whole number out of the way first. 2, it's in the ones place, 2 and 3 tenths. So my 3 has to go in my tenths place. 2 and 3 tenths. Tenths place is the one directly to the right of the decimal. All right, let's try 3 and 7 hundredths. 3 and 7 hundredths. That would be 3 is my whole number and 7 hundredths. Well, now I'm not dealing with dimes anymore, so the 7 can't sit right here in the tenths place. It has to go in the hundredths place. So I know I have no tenths, and I need to put my 7 in the hundredths place. 3 and 7 hundredths. Let's try one more. I'm going to do 6 and 81 hundredths. So I need to start with my 6. My 6 is my whole number, so I put it here. And 6 and 81 hundredths. So this time I know I'm going to be using both my tenths and my hundredths. One of the hints I gave you is to look to that number completely all the way to the right there in the numerator. And that one is going to sit in my hundredths space. So I'm going to put my 2 place value marks in again. My 1 goes in my hundredths, and then the 8 has to go here. 6 and 81 hundredths. All right. I am going to put up a video next that you guys can practice along with me. There are also some pages that you can practice and some other videos and whatnot that you can do to practice on this. This is a little bit more challenging than taking a decimal to a fraction, but with a bit of practice, I know you guys are going to get this. Have a good time.